to chat about the impacts that COVID-19 is happening. Now, today, what we're going to try to cover off is a couple of wins that you might be able to have along the way. We're going to separate the impact of this into three separate specific areas. And then we're also just going to throw it out to any questions that you may have that we can either answer today or we can point you in the right direction of to get the right answer. So thanks for virtually being here, Beck.
I know it's a really good opportunity to get a good sticky beak into people's spare rooms and kitchens at the moment, whilst most people are working from home.
I do appreciate the aqua in the background. Hey, so what's your take so far on everything that's happening, say from an Australian perspective in the finance world?
It's a lot. I remember when GFC was going down, everyone was assessing the current state of play, but also they were looking at the history books to say try and compare and try and find places of reference to previous economic shocks. But this is just a whole new kettle of fish, and no one has that reference stack to go through. So it is really challenging because we don't have that playbook to fall back to. But it also means that we have an opportunity here to sort of make things up as we go along. And certainly from the government perspective, they're trying to write their own rules, trying to get Australia through this in one piece. And I think Australia is actually incredibly well positioned to get through this compared to a lot of other developed countries.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we're trying to help people to sort of navigate through is making sure that they're listening to and taking in the right information for the position that they're in. And something that particularly our advice team is trying to help people is to work out whether they fall into one of three different categories that we've really seen pop up. The first one is the people that impacts are going to happen right now. They've either lost their job or they're imminently about to lose their job. So they're right at the coalface. The second group is people that I think there's an inevitability around some really serious financial impacts. And then the third group, which I don't think too many people are talking about at the moment, is people that opportunities are going to pop up out of the back of this crisis very quickly for. So, Beck, I might throw to you. Let's have a chat firstly about those people that are right in the middle of, of serious impacts for them.
Look, it sounds incredibly simple, but I do really recommend taking a breath. And for all things right now, given the current landscape, nothing is actually urgent. Like no one will evict you, your power will not get turned off. Everything you can take a breath on, and knowing that is the case actually allows you the time to look at what's coming in and what's going out for you as an individual or you as a household. There has never been a better time to give your budget a really good overhaul. Check your direct debits, see what's nice to have, see what is absolutely mandatory, and see what are some of the things that you potentially can take a little bit of a haircut on in the short term. This stuff is super important to assess. We all know that we need to have an awareness of what's going in our household budget, but most people it's just been in the too hard basket or they just haven't got around to it. But this is a really big opportunity for people to check in on things. So checking what's going on, cancelling anything that you don't need right now, shoring up the gaps, plugging all the holes as much as you can so you can really reduce what's going out the door. What would you add into that, Matt?
I think that a really simple step that everyone should take is to put aside some time and set up their MyGov account. A lot of the stimulus packages that are coming out, whether that be for employers or employees, is going to require a MyGov account to be set up. And as we move further away from person-to-person contact, what you'll find is more of the government news and initiatives will flow out through that. So over on our website, we've got a blog of how to set up your MyGov account. That's popping up a little bit later today, I think. Might be a little bit frustrating as some government websites are, but it'll be certainly worth hopefully only 15 or 20 minutes that it takes.
Yeah, and that's really looking at the second side of the equation. Like I said, knowing what comes out at the end of the day is an equation of income versus expenses. And the MyGov site, Centrelink, the ATO, all of the stimulus packages, it's all flowing through that network. That's shoring up the income side of things. And then the bit that you can really take care of is the expenses.
Yeah, and Beck, what about for those people that are either, have property and feel like they're going to be struggling, or alternatively, have property with tenants in it that they feel like might be struggling. What's a really good step to take straight away?
Well, let's assume that you've done the first step of doing a bit of overhaul of what's going on. And if the numbers are not adding up and you absolutely are going to battle paying your mortgage repayments, then having a really proactive conversation with your bank is an excellent place to start. I do really caution people against having that conversation with the bank if you don't need to right now. The card is still going to be there to play over the next 3 to 6 months. So if you think you're going okay at the moment, hold tight on that. And then you can always revisit conversation with the bank next week or next month or next quarter when you need to. Also, right now, I don't know if anyone's called the bank. It's like a 2-hour wait to be on the phone with them. So if you don't need to talk to them right now, it is a good idea to hold tight. So that's one side of things. If you're a landlord, like I have an investment property, reach out to your tenants. Have a conversation with them. Ask if they're in trouble. Ask if they're struggling, because if they are, you would much rather know that now before the day comes around that suddenly they're in arrears with their rent. And so being on the front foot, again, understanding what's coming in and what's going out for you as a household is really, really critical, so that nothing catches you as a surprise. Because even though, I don't know about you, Matt, I just feel like every day there's more news, and it can create a sense of like rush, and you're feeling a little bit frantic. So it's really nice to actually pull it back and say, I'm not rushed. Like, I can take my time. I can spend time tonight looking at this myself. And then I can, if I need to, then I can call the bank tomorrow.
So I think the key point there is patience. And one of the other things that I'd say, and we've really fortunately seen a lot of this from our mortgage broker and lending clients at Rising Tide, is pick up the phone. I know there's been a couple of videos that have been put out by Sam Gwenda, who runs our lending team, that'll give you a bit of an overview about some of those key topics that are inevitably going to pop up. So have a chat to a really trusted source, and make sure that you don't just take information from a general service, because everyone's situation's a little bit different. Beck, you mentioned before about people, understanding what's going in and what's going out. What would you sort of say for people if they're in the position that they may not have lost their job right now, but it's going to impact? Would it be worthwhile sort of kicking the tires on their current lending, given that, there might be one opportunity out of all this that interest rates look like they're going to be pretty low for a long period?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, do it now, particularly if you think you may be losing your job or being stood down in the future. Certainly getting anything approved sooner rather than later is not such a bad idea. But also, it's a really good opportunity to do that, but just batten down the hatches. There is time potentially for some people between the impact or that sort of financial tidal wave hitting them. And so it means that you might have a fortnight, a month, 2 months to go where you can probably save a little bit of cash. You can cancel some subscriptions. You can apply for a better finance deal. These things that really put you in a strong position to then weather the storm, because instead of having to weather this much, you might only have to weather this much. And so knowing where that's coming is going to give you ample opportunity to get your ass into gear.
Yeah, I like that. And I feel like it's a really good time if people have got some extra time up their sleeve in between isolation, that they can probably spend a bit of time, even if it means a little bit of waiting on the phone, as you mentioned before.
Absolutely, because how many times have people said, look, I know I need to call Telstra because I think they're ripping me off, or no sledges against Telstra, or get a better deal on my internet provider, or whatever it is. It's like that excuse does not hold up anymore in the current climate. Like, we know you've got time. And if this current situation does not motivate you to batten down the hatches and save for that rainy day, like, I don't know what would. So if it's not absolute dire straits for you at the moment, but you think it may be coming, now is the time you absolutely need to get your ass into gear on this.
One of the things I definitely say in terms of getting your ass into gear, if someone has a spare half an hour this afternoon, one of the big expenses for a lot of households is private health insurance. That is actually going to go up for a lot of funds tomorrow, being the 1st of April.
Have you heard the latest announcement, Matt?
No.
Oh, this is what I mean about news coming out every 30 seconds is that they've all announced that they're going to freeze for 6 months.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. I've been keeping my my news to once a day, so I missed that one. Another good reason to make sure you keep on top of it. Well, that gives you 6 months, but don't take 6 months. I rang our provider last week and found out that the cover that we've got is actually really competitive, and that just enabled me to sort of put that to bed for another 12 months.
But I think that conversation, particularly about health, private health insurance, is so relevant because people are cancelling their insurances because they're trying to release $100, $200, $300 into their cash flow each month. And so you can still have that conversation with them. The insurers are definitely willing to come to the table. And so definitely kick the tires on that one.
And also need to be aware for anyone that's earning over $80,000 to cancel your hospital cover, it's likely to cost you another 1% in tax. So make sure you check it out for, otherwise you might just be reducing your tax return come July. Beck, I suppose one of the things for the people that are either in a bit of stress right now or it's looking like it'll head that way, that's come up across my desk a few times is how can I access the $10,000 from my super, and realistically, should I? You're the expert here. Give me your 30-second rundown on it.
Matt, when have I ever been able to give a 30-second rundown on anything? In terms, let's go with the second question first, which is like, should I? And again, if you know that you are actually going to run out of money in the next couple of months, if the numbers are not adding up for you, then it is, and it can be a really viable option for you to access that money before 30 June or access the second $10,000 or potentially the first $10,000 after the 1st of July. If things are dire and you're needing to put food on your table, your landlord won't come to the party, or you're really worried about medical care, compassionate reasons, whatever it might be, if things are dire for you, it's a really valid option. But if things are not dire, or you suspect that things are going to be dire in the future, but they're not right now, hold tight on this. We've been talking a lot about the actual cost, the real cost of taking out money out of super. And now I'm pretty sure my 30 seconds have expired. So you can explain that one, Matt.
Yeah,
tell us about the real cost.
It's a really important figure to take into consideration. We ran some numbers in our virtual office over the last couple of days. And for someone that is the age of 30 right now, to take $10,000 out of their super, by the time they get to retirement age of 65, that 10 grand based on 8% return and no inflation would be over $150,000. To put that into perspective to someone who's 40 years old, that number reduces to about $73,000. So all of a sudden, you're talking about the trade-off between $10,000 now or between 7 and 15 times that amount in the longer term. So all we'd say is before anyone is going to make a decision on that, make sure A, you need it, but B, also have a chat to someone to understand what impact it's going to have on your position. Now, thirdly, in terms of if the decision is to access that money, the way that people will need to do it is not through your super fund. It's actually through the MyGov account that I spoke about earlier today. It's going to be facilitated through the ATO. Given that the super funds aren't really equipped to be able to deal with what they've said is could be $150 billion taken out of super over the next sort of 3 or 4 months. So just to reiterate, only do it if you need to. Have a chat to someone who knows a little bit more about it. Sit on it for a couple of days, but if you need to, it's absolutely the right thing to do, but just be aware that it could have a pretty big financial impact down the track.
Is there any other sort of concerns you have about accessing that money at the moment, Matt?
Yeah, look, I think from my perspective, there's a couple of fundamentals in relation to money. And the first one is that people often under duress don't make the greatest decisions. And second of all, in my 13 years of working in the industry, money often burns a hole in people's pockets, even if it should specifically be going to a certain expense. So that is my biggest worry, but also particularly for people that aren't in a great position to be making big calls that could have $150,000 impact on their financial future.
Yeah, it is a lot to take in, and I mean, we might talk about this in a moment. But if someone has the choice between their mortgage repayment or withdrawing money out of super, what would you do at the
Yeah, I
moment?
think it's probably the simplest and most often asked question at the moment. What we'd sort of say,
Or both.
and we've put a couple of pieces up around this on the website. First and foremost, it would be to talk to your bank first, purely for the fact that the interest rates are really low at the moment. So the potential impact of having to pay that money back a little bit down the track on your loan is likely to be lower than what your average super fund is going to return over the next 30 years. But taking into consideration the tax effectiveness of super, you're certainly not comparing apples with apples. So to be clear, I'd talk to your bank first and look at that as an option before digging into super, because it's likely to have a bigger impact along the journey. But disclaimer, have a chat to someone who knows what they're talking about before you make any decisions.
Yeah, there certainly seems with at the moment, like the news bulletins and the morning shows and the breakfast radios, all of these commentary that's coming out around this, it certainly feels like it's a bit of a given that people who have access to these financial remedies take them because they can. And so you're saying hold tight until you've spoken to someone or if you really know that you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Be as patient as you possibly can. Now, Beck, I want to ask you the question that I've had, probably secondary to that one you just asked. Should I move my super to cash?
No.
No.
That is yeah, I'd go with a pretty straight no for that. Look, full disclaimer, it's all about you and your individual needs and your circumstances. But let's take the 30-year-old that you were referring to before. If you have already been investing in growth assets and the value of them have those assets have come down, now is not the time to convert to cash. Maybe 6 months ago, when the value was reasonably high, could have been worth considering. But if you have already purchased, and this goes for within super or share portfolios or bonds or whatever assets you hold, if the market is down right now, look, moving to cash, that is actually where you crystallize your losses. If we look at what happened in the global financial crisis, people who lost money are those who converted to cash at the bottom of the market.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that it's a really good time now to make sure that your super is invested in a way that is really congruent with how your long-term strategy plays out. And if that is wrong, it's okay to make some changes, but not because old mate's brother's cousin down the virtual milk bar said that he should move it to cash because the world's about to implode.
I feel like that's actually the theme from this entire conversation today is there is so like everyone is talking about this at the moment. I don't think there's ever been a topic that is so prolific within the virtual and actual community. Do not be getting your financial advice from your next door neighbor over the fence from 2 meters apart. You know, it needs to be relevant to you. It needs to be relevant to your circumstance. Even your parents. Your parents are probably 30 years older than you and are in a vastly different financial situation to you.
Yeah, I think taking into consideration that stock take is to look at what your financial goals are. And certainly for me, my retirement income is probably another 30 or 35 years away. Looking historically, what we know is that the next peak will be higher than the previous. We just don't know when it's going to be. So it's a matter of being patient and make sure that your investment strategy is in line with with what your goals are and potentially what your age and your investment time frame is. Beck, what about for those people that are maybe on the more fortunate side? They've been able to maintain steady work throughout this period. whether it be essential services that are probably doing a whole lot of overtime, or people that work for the government. What are some of the things that they could potentially be looking to take advantage of at this stage?
It is, I think most of us understand the investment theory of buy low and sell high, and we won't know if we're in the bottom of the market until 6 to 12 months after it's already happened. But we know that the market is down right now, and therefore, if for some people, if they have spare cash or they have surplus cash flow, it can be really worthwhile considering if it's a good time to start investing or increase your investing if you're already undertaking this. And it is, on paper, it is a really good time to explore that. It is hard to do in reality. Like, Matt, how many times would you have asked somebody the question, like, if the market fell by 30%, how would you feel about that? It is different when it's actually you've got real money in play. But, you've asked that question to a lot of people. How do you see it now playing out?
Yeah, once again, and I think we've been really fortunate to have some good conversations over the last couple of weeks, and we applaud the people that are reaching out. I know that our sort of activity within our advice team was up by sort of 30 or 40% last week. And those conversations range from, sit tight because it's in line with your investment time frame. And then there was a couple where it's like, we've actually been preparing for this. We've capitalized on some gains along the journey. But the hardest part is then actually just for people to make big decisions right now when there is not just financial stress, but there's a lot of social stress. And people are spending a lot of time and energy working out the best way to play things. What I'd sort of say before we finish up over the next couple of minutes is a really simple game plan is to not take in too much information from too many different sources. Make sure that it's a source that you really trust and that it's going to be consistent and primarily for your sort of place where your demographic. So don't be reading the newsletter for your grandparents' financial planner because it's likely to be geared towards people that are retired or close to it. Second of all, as you said, Beck, is to have a really good overview and a bit of a working bee on your own cash flow situation. And it might be pretty stressful to look at what may play out over the next 3 or 4 months. But what I know is that by digging into that and doing some projections how the cash flow might play out, it'll mean that you can get on top of anything. And then thirdly is to just have a conversation with someone that you really trust and has good knowledge in this space to be able to work out a plan of attack. And that may be, if you're a business owner, how to capitalize for both you and your staff to be able to keep them on. Or if you're an individual, what sort of conversation you can have with your employer to make sure that you, if possible, don't lose your job and that you can keep your head above water. Beck, before we finish up, how would you, have you got anything final to add?
I think that summed it up really, really well. As I mentioned at the start, around taking a breath on the bad and the challenging sides, but also taking a breath on the opportunity as well. In the same way we wouldn't rush to pull 10 grand out of super, we also want to take our time putting 10 grand into the market if that's what you decide is right for you. So taking a breath is really important, and also really acknowledging this will pass. How long? No one knows that right now, but it will pass. And so we all want to make sure we're as strong as we can be on the other side.
Yeah. And just finally, for any particularly small business owners out there, we've been amazed at a lot of the stimulus that has happened out there. Over the next week, we will be getting Braden Johnston, who is the senior accountant Rising Tide, in to give a bit of a bigger overview on the business side of things. Certainly not mine or Beck's forte, but if there is any questions in the meantime, shoot them across to us. Probably the best way to get in contact is to head across to our website. Under the blog tab, you'll see there's a couple of pages that are up there, and there's a few links to either have a chat with Braden regarding small business or accounting needs, Sam Gwenda, who's the resident specialist in regards to what's happening with the banks and how to get deferred payments and how to capitalise on potential interest rate drops. And then if anyone needs to get in touch with regard to personal financial planning, there's a link to my diary. So please yell out or send us an email to admin@ctrt.com.au. Beck, I very much thank you for your time. Hopefully we can do it again soon. But in the meantime, enjoy plenty of time at home and we'll chat soon.
Wash your hands. Stay safe.